Hey everyone, welcome to the first Games and Goblins deck tech video. Streets of New Capenna just released and the first deck we picked to build was, unsurprisingly, Jund. We believe that this deck has the potential to carry us in our upcoming Zero to Hero series, where we try to pilot a deck from Bronze 4 all the way up the ladder as high as we can go. So be on the lookout for that series, especially if you're new to the game, and you can learn with us. So enough with the shameless promotion, we'll go ahead and get into the deck tech video here. We'll start from the left and work our way right, and conveniently on the left just happens to be the entirety of the removal suite. So we're running 3 Bloodchief's Thirst, 3 Voltage Surge, and 3 Meathook Massacre. Bloodchief's Thirst is pretty good because it just kills an early threat. It's especially relevant for Giada. She is very good, and the whole Angel deck kind of just revolves around her. Um, Later on in the game, paying that kicker cost isn't really a big deal to take out a big threat, whether it's an Obnixilis, a Lolth, just a giant creature, whatever it might be. But it's both great early game and late game. Moving down to Voltage Surge, pretty straightforward, 2 damage to a creature or planeswalker. Pretty relevant for Obnixilis. Oftentimes whenever they come down with a casualty, they'll do the -2 on one of them and they'll plus the other one. So being able to just zap one of them right away is pretty good. Later on, sacrificing an artifact for 4 is also very possible in our deck. Bloodtithe Harvester, Fable the Mirror Breaker, Goldspan Dragon, Deadly Dispute all make treasure tokens that we can sacrifice. With the exception of Bloodtithe, obviously he makes a blood token. But regardless, easy sacrifice fodder for the Voltage Surge. Meathook Massacre, I don't really think I need to say anything about it. It is just absolutely fantastic. Completely blanks the Anvil decks because obviously they revolve on having you lose life by their creatures leaving the battlefield. But whenever they have a creature die, we just gain, so we kind of just blank them right away. And then just for every deck at all that has any creatures, I mean, Meathook's just so good. If it wasn't legendary, I'd be running 4 of them, but it's just, I mean, I can't really say anything about it that you don't already know. Absolutely fantastic card. Moving on to our 2 drops, you'll see we have some creatures finally. Bloodtithe Harvester and Tenacious Underdog. Both of them power of 3, toughness of 2, which is pretty good. Just early damage is nice. The nice thing about Bloodtithe Harvester is the fact that it makes that blood token whenever it enters the battlefield, which of course helps with, again, Voltage Surge, Deadly Dispute, whatever. Tenacious Underdog, same kind of concept, but the big thing here is its blitz ability. Later on in the game, having it be able to come back from the graveyard is huge. Regardless if we want to use it as sacrifice fodder for something like Deadly Dispute or Obnixilis, whatever it might be, Tenacious Underdog being able to recur itself is fantastic. And then, of course, later on being able to blitz it in, maybe deal 3 damage, draw a card, it's pretty awesome. So, pretty high on Tenacious Underdog. Of course, Deadly Dispute, everyone's playing this card in Limited especially, but I think it's pretty valuable in this deck. We have a good few ways to make some artifacts, and our creatures, at least the Tenacious Underdog, we're kind of okay with sacrificing. But drawing 2 cards and creating a treasure token is huge. Our treasure tokens are much better than normal just because of Goldspan Dragon later on, but we'll get there when we get there. So for our 3 drops, of course, we have Obnixilis himself. I mean, if you haven't really seen this card, you're sleeping. Definitely a 4 of in this deck. It is just so good. He just deals so much damage, and especially if you can get him to ultimate, I mean, it's fantastic. So the whole format, I think, is going to be defined by Obnixilis and how we deal with it, or just how many people are running it, whether it's a Jund deck, a Grixis deck, whatever it might be. So definitely be on the lookout, and if you're not going to play Jund, think of a way that you're going to be getting rid of this guy because it's huge. Sorry about the dog. I'm sure you guys can hear that in the background. Our other 3-drop, Fable the Mirror Breaker. I was a little hesitant on this card. I saw a bunch of people running it against me, and it just was like, I don't know why it's so good. Why it's so good? Everyone's running it. It's in every deck. But as I started trying to run it myself, I'm kind of a believer now. All 3 of the modes on this are really good for us. The 2/2 guy that makes treasure tokens is fantastic, especially because we can make more of it with the Seeker's Chariot, or, I mean, even copy it with Kiki Jiki, and just pump out more treasures as the time goes on, which of course is fodder for things like Deadly Dispute, Voltage Surge, or just pumping out more threats later on. There have been many games when I played like 2 Goldspan Dragons or just 2 5-drops in general, so definitely huge. Second stage, looting. I mean, the only thing that sucks is you have to discard first, but in this deck in particular, since we kind of stop at 5 and we have so much treasure generation, I kind of don't mind discarding some lands. We run 24 in this deck, so oftentimes I'll be discarding 2 cards on turn 4 and just getting some good stuff, hopefully. And of course, it coming in and making Kiki Tiki is very nice, especially when you can make another Goldspan Dragon or another Workshop Warchief, or even these small guys too. It's not totally irrelevant to think about those, but if the reflection does get to stick around for that long, you can get some huge value from these guys later on. 2 Asika's Chariots. Whenever I first built this deck, I had 3 or 4 of them. I can't really recall. I've noticed that it is a little bit clunky, so I don't want to draw them all the time. It doesn't really get hit with too much removal. I mean, it is an extremely powerful card, but the huge part of it is whenever it attacks, you create a copy of a target token, and whenever you casualty Obnixilis, you make a token. So you can literally copy the Planeswalker again, and potentially have 3, maybe even more on the board. So it's definitely really valuable there. And then on top of that, copying either the 4/4 Rhino or the 2/2 Goblin isn't something to scoff at either. It's quite good, honestly. So definitely run 2, maybe 3 in the future, but I kind of like it right at 2. Going on to our 5-drops, we have Goldspan Dragon and Workshop Warchief. This is just a mini Thragtusk for those of you that played back in the day. Comes in and gives you 3 life, and then when it dies, it gives you a body. And of course, 5/3 tramples, pretty relevant, especially for the decks that are making 1/1s and stuff like that. This is a great card, like I said before, to copy with Fable the Mirror Breaker, sacrifice with Obnixilis because it creates a replacement body, and then he is essentially at 6 because you'll probably plus it after that. And sometimes it's notable that the 5/3 or the 4/4 won't die to your Meat Hook Massacre, so potentially something to think about there as well. But oftentimes, like, just gaining that 3 life is just absolutely huge. And then, of course, you could always blitz it in as well, which I haven't done too much yet, but it's definitely a possibility you should consider. And Goldspan Dragon, I mean, if you haven't seen Goldspan Dragon or aren't sick of it yet, I guess you're probably just like me and just started, but this card is extremely strong. 5 mana, flying haste. When it attacks or becomes a target, so as long as you cast it and it's not counterspelled, you're gonna create a treasure token, regardless if they kill it right away or you actually get to attack. But then treasures you have get to add 2 mana instead of 1. So, like I said, having these all create treasure tokens makes this card very, very powerful. And it being able to be copied by Fable the Mirror Breaker, I mean, this card is just so powerful. I originally had 2 Zayatoras in this deck, but I just found it wasn't powerful enough. The haste on this card is actually pretty important. It's just, like I said, super powerful. I can't really shake it up any more than that. So between our 2 5-drops, we have 6 total, and our curve is kind of solid here a lot of early gameplay. This kind of gets played wherever. It's just like a filler card. 2 drops into 3s, 4s, and then our top end is pretty heavy. Moving on to the lands, we have 12 of the pathways just so we can have black and red and green kind of whenever we want. 4 of our tri-land, which is the only bad side is it comes in tapped, but beggars can't be choosers, I guess. And then my most recent addition would be these 3 lands, 2 man lands, and then this one here that destroys a target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic. Pretty important, honestly, especially because some of the angel decks and some of the anvil decks, it's just really nice to be able to drop one of their artifacts or enchantments and not have to worry about it too much anymore. The only thing I was considering about doing was maybe dropping this swamp for maybe another Hive of the Eye Tyrant. It becomes a man land for 4 just like this, but it having menace is pretty relevant, and also exiling a card from a graveyard. I do suspect a lot of tenacious underdogs, so being able to exile that from the opponent's graveyard so they can't blitz it back at you is pretty important. The only reason I do prefer to have 1 basic in is because of things like this land or Field of Ruin or anything that makes you search for a basic land. I don't want to be just penalized and not have one, especially if I'm struggling with lands already. Could be pretty disastrous. So that's the basic concept of this deck. I kind of have it set up for best of 1 right now. My sideboard would probably look something like this. A Braid is great because it can either kill a creature or take care of one of those pesky anvils or some of those equipments. Sorin and Lulth are just both really fantastic planeswalkers in black. A lot of Jund mid-range decks are already running both of them. I kind of prefer to have the creatures. So far they've been a little bit more impactful for me, but we'll see how this deck changes as I progress up the ladder. And of course, things like Ray of Enfeeblement and stuff like that to take care of angels. 1 mana kill an angel is pretty fantastic, so highly recommend having these in your sideboard if you're going to be playing the best of 3 matches. It's also worth considering maybe putting a Braid in main deck instead of something like Voltage Surge, or maybe do 2/2 and 2. Sometimes that anvil deck, if you don't draw Meathook Massacre or ways to get rid of those anvils, it will just take over the game. It's hard to get past it when they're just draining and hitting you for 4 damage or whatever it is every turn. It always seems like they just draw all 3 anvils all the time, so having a way to get rid of them might be important to have in the main deck. So yeah, the game plan is pretty straightforward. I mean, it's just make guys and kill them. Goldspan Dragon's huge, great finisher. Warchief's nothing to scoff at. And of course, Ob Nixilis just does a ton of damage as the game goes on. So, I don't really have too much more to say about this deck. Hopefully you guys, if you do build it, you find some success with it. Feel free to comment below if you have any changes or anything like that that you would make to it. And hopefully we'll start progressing up that ladder pretty soon. So we'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for stopping in.